Great. So hopefully everyone just saw that. We welcome to the September meeting of the ACT-IAC Emerging Technology Community of Interest. My name is Todd Hager. I'm the industry chair for the Emerging Technology Community of Interest. And as the message just said, we're going to be recording this today for posterity. And let's go ahead and get started. We've got a handful of things to get through today, and we want to be sure that you're going to be engaging throughout, and we have a hard stop at 11, so we're going to try to get through everything there. So the Emerging Technology Community of Interest is really made up of a series of working groups where all the work is done, and those groups meet either weekly or bi-weekly, and you'll hear about them at the very end. But just a quick run through, we've got the blockchain working group, the AI working group, the intelligent automation working group. We've got an IoT smart infrastructure working group and a DevOps working group. So we're thrilled to have you here today, and we'd be happy to host you in any of those working groups as well too. And that is all supported by a really tremendous leadership team. Many of them been around for years with us, great folks, and we've got a good cross-section of industry and government here. And I encourage you to reach out to any of these folks to be able to find information or get connected with other working group activities. I'm going to hand this over to Nancy, who's got some updates for us from ACT-IAC.
Hi, good morning. I wanted to highlight two upcoming events that may be of interest to you. The first is the US Cyber Challenge Award, and this is the first time that ACT-IAC has done this event. This is in partnership with the Center for Internet Security, and what CIS has done is work with different colleges and universities around the country to do a cyber camp over the summer. And those who participated and qualified will then move to the next round in a competition where the winners will have scholarships and prizes. So the awarding will happen at the ACT-IAC program on October 6th. So this is a really interesting and fun event. Like I said, the first time we've done this. So I encourage everyone to participate. It's on October 6th. And then our granddaddy conference, the Imagination ELC, this year is going to be a hybrid event, November 7 to 9. The in-person part will be in Hershey, Pennsylvania, Hershey Lodge. And the conference theme is Adventures in Change. And similar to the past years where we have themes and main topics. So these are the ones that are listed in the slide. So you are now able to register in person or for the virtual component of the conference. So I will share the registration and event link on the chat box. Thank you. Back to you, Todd.
Great. Thanks, Nancy. Appreciate it. So, I want to be sure that Cindy Good gets a chance to talk about some of this. Cindy, if you're out there, I'd love to have you talk about the half-day events that we've got planned and how people can get in touch.
Definitely. There's actually a slide later on, Todd, so I don't know if you want me to talk now or should I wait until the slide comes on?
Why don't you just, brief 30 seconds for us now about what these events are all about. That'd be great.
So there's, just like Nancy said, there's the two other events that are coming on that we essentially work with the Emerging Technologies COI, and then we partner with industry, with agency, and with academia. The first one is the Shark Tank competition. It's scheduled for October 15th. The idea there is essentially it's focused on making acquisitions easier, faster, and simpler. And so we'll have government agencies, academia, industry, they'll all have an opportunity to pitch ideas on how federal government can leverage emerging technologies to solve federal acquisition challenges. The second one is Emerging Technology Day. These are events where we can go to you, a government agency, and focus on an emerging technology that you'd like to talk about, and we'll host half-day events where we can also bring in industry, academia, and other government agencies to help you understand more what this technology is, types of use cases that you can apply across your organization, and just essentially, give you a better understanding and answer any questions that you have. And then there's a few slides coming up that I can talk a little bit about the specific events that we're doing.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Cindy. Appreciate it. Let's jump right into the program. So we've got a really great program set aside for you guys with the grand poobahs of artificial intelligence within, certainly within the working group and across all of our working groups. We're focused on being able to show you about, talk about the AI frameworks and the approaches that are in use today across government for AI. So without further ado, I want to introduce our speakers here. We've got Sandy Barsky, who frankly requires no introduction. But Sandy served at the VA NI working on artificial intelligence certification service management and AI in the Brain Forum, National Use Case and Solutions Library, and supporting the AI tech sprints. He delivered the first end-to-end paperless contract task order system as well at his time in GSA. He's one of the lead authors of the ACT-IAC AI primer, the playbook, the ethical application of AI framework, and other papers and frameworks designed for use for government. After nearly 40 years in government service, Sandy has moved on, retired just recently, and began work as the executive program director, government and education for Oracle America. We've also got Swathi Young with us too, and Swathi has been working with us for many, many years. She's an international keynote speaker, blogger, community builder, and chief technology officer of Integrity Management Services, and it's a healthcare services company where she's leading innovative technology solutions for clients. In her 20+ years of technology experience, she has led over 100 digital projects globally. Swathi believes that the intersection of artificial intelligence and humanities is important to focus on as we lay the foundation of AI applications for future generations. And in 2020, Swathi was selected to be a member of the Forbes Technology Council, where she shares her expert insights in original business articles on Forbes.com. She recently co-authored the Ethical AI Framework, which you'll hear more about, a framework to help federal agencies evaluate the ethical outcomes of AI products. And she previously co-authored the AI Playbook and the framework for implementing AI systems. And Nevin Taylor, hopefully he's joined us by now, also known as Mustang, is a visionary strategist, servant leader, and technologist. This artificial intelligence and machine learning subject matter expert can cultivate functionality to formulate ingenious, innovative capabilities by capitalizing on the art of the possible to create the science of the probable. With over 40 years of leadership in industry, academia, and government experience, he expertly actualizes the inherent value of data to unleash the power of information by leveraging technology to evolve knowledge in a way that empowers understanding. A 2-term White House Presidential Innovation Fellow and founder of Federal National AI Institute and creator of the United States Air Force AFWorks. He's a Harvard Cyber Policy Lecturer, National International Security Fellow, Oxford Alumni for Knowledge and Change Management and Innovation Technology Subject Matter Expert, and Stanford alumnus on Strategy, Decisions, and Risk Management. Let's see, he is currently the Chief Technology Officer at the Consumer Product Safety Commission and is the CJON Leadership Award recipient and an acknowledged combat decorated veteran with the award of the United States Defense Distinguished Service Medal. We're also joined by Jim Liew. Dr. Liew is an Associate Professor of Finance at Johns Hopkins, Carey Business School, and revels in pushing the boundaries of financial knowledge and product development, both as an academic and fintech entrepreneur. He has published pioneering research in the intersection of social media, big data, blockchain, and financial markets. Dr. Liew co-founded SoKat Consulting, also creating award-winning world-class machine learning, AI, and blockchain products and services, primarily serving institutional investors, government agencies, academic institutions, and select startups. Previously, Dr. Liew has been with the Carlyle Asset Management Group, Campbell and Company, and Morgan Stanley. He holds a BA in mathematics and from the University of Chicago and a PhD in finance from Columbia University. And then lastly, we've got Fred DeVals, my partner in crime here. He's Vice President of Prometheus Computing, where he helps develop the vision, innovation, and strategy of the company. He's also Senior Software Engineer and Program Manager overseeing the design, architecture, and development of custom software applications for Prometheus's federal and commercial clients. Frederick is Vice Chair of the ACT-IAC Emerging Technology Committee of Interest and Co-Chair of the Blockchain Working Group. He's also a member of the IEEE Blockchain Initiative and the CSA Blockchain Working Group. Okay, Neil, over to you.
Thank you so much, Todd. And, before I begin, what I'd really like to say is, Jackie and Nancy and everybody else, thank you for, taking care of the administrative portion of things that you don't get to see, that we, help put together a great program. And, like to say, to Sandy, to Swathi, to Fred, and to Jim, thank you so much for agreeing to share your thoughts. It's always a pleasure to have all of you on, and it's going to be very interesting to hear from all of you as you exchange thoughts. And for everybody else in the listening in, what you'll find is that between Swathi, between Sandy, between Jim and Fred, they have the right balance of government and industry experience. So it's not just when they talk, it's not just theory. It's about the practical application for delivery of better services and better experiences to the American public. And and they also talk about their eye to the future on where we should be. So I'm so honored to have all these great individuals on. And knowing that Sandy's already been introduced as the Grand Poobah, I'm going to throw the first question on to him for his thoughts first, and then welcome the panel to chime in. So, Sandy, how was this framework developed? I mean, was there an ask for it? How did you go about finding the right people to contribute to this framework? And what sort of cajoling did you have to do? Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. And thank you for having been my colleague at the General Services Administration, where you really have achieved some significant gains in the understanding and application. That's the practical application of artificial intelligence. And I really have to hand it to Neil and what is done at the GSA in the Center of Excellence. Now to that question, I came from GSA. What an organization. Office of Government-Wide Policy. What did they come up with? Shared Services Framework. Well, I will say one thing, and I have to throw something to a number of colleagues who I worked with at ONB and elsewhere. We wrote the papers that created that office in GSA, which is sort of fun, to actually write a paper that ends up creating a whole new office in a federal agency. But it's all about shared services. So they come up with a framework how to modernize and get folks over and agencies over, prepared and over to shared services. Now, I'm looking at Fred on this, and he's on mute, but I'm going to say Fred has embraced this and become the absolute expert on this, Neil. So having a good framework, we went from what the government uses and knows and understands, and then looked at what our industry colleagues here had given us, which is a excellent plinth on which to build this structure, and that is the primer. There was one federal employee or one government employee who was involved in it, and that was myself, and there were a number of really, really good and smart people from industry, and we built out the primer. But without that primer, we couldn't gone on to the frameworks for the adoption of anything, which is again what the M3 framework, the modernization framework, is about, where a number of folks all leaned in, and to recruit those was not hard because there are so many CIOs and CTOs throughout the federal government who joined. And if I could show you the picture of 39 of them in a room at GSA in front of a whiteboard, all crowded around it, adding their thoughts. And so Nevin Taylor, who is on this panel, I don't see him right now, so many PIFs, so many CTOs. I'm seeing my good friend Pete DeGreek here, talk about CTOs of multiple departments. In the case of Pete, we had, again, CTOs, CIOs, and what was best, We had people who weren't technically adept, but who were in charge of mission. And therefore, anything that we did was going to affect them. And as we all know, the dollars come from where they operate. And they were there too. Again, 39 people, and we started on our work. That was a lot. I'll go back over to you, Neil.
So a follow on, Sandy. Do you remember the first person who you asked to join?
Oh, that is cruel. There were so many great people in there that, no, I can't actually. Was it you?
No, I was thinking about one of the panelists so that they could throw like rocks at you later on, but
No,
that was a good dodge,
it was none
Although
of the
I think
panelists.
Fred was one of the first people, if I remember, that was heavily involved in this, and and that's where Fred, as you got involved, it's, as we all know, it's very hard to say no to Sandy, because not only is he exemplifies public service, but he asks so nicely. So when he asked you, Fred, what were the key themes you were thinking about? How did you, get this project off the ground and decide what the framework should cover, what the framework should not cover, and how did you go about parsing all these issues out? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry if you hear some noise in the background. Yeah, so we looked at, as Sandy said, we started with the primer. And so the primer gave us some knowledge, right, about a better understanding of what AI can be for governments. But that's disconnected from maybe some sort of a process or some sort of a methodology, or also other information that are surrounding how this technology can be integrated or used or leveraged within a use case for the government. There was like some missing pieces, right? So that's where we try to look within agencies and of existing processes or framework that existed already, and see if we could adapt it, right, to the use of emerging technologies like AI and ML. So that's where the M3 playbook from GSA for IT modernization came into play. So we sort of like looked and studied it, seeing how actually brought the team, part of the team that did that playbook, so that they could tell us a little bit, how they came up to the different processes of features, that functional areas that they had, and then we adapted it. Right, we took all the ingredients and made our own sauce to adapt it to first blockchain and then AI.
Thank you so much for that, Fred. And I see a lot of wonderful people on this, listening into this call. And what I'd like to say is that this is a discussion with peers, so it's not a one-way conversation. So if you have any questions, you also have contributions, feel free to, if you're not as bold as, turning your camera on and unmuting, feel free to post the question in the chat or your comment in the chat. That would also be greatly appreciated. And, it's so interesting that, I was able to especially get Swathi here, because Swathi was one of the first people that, as I was in Homeland Security at the time, Department of Homeland Security, talking about developing frameworks and engaging with industry. Swathi was one of the first people I interacted with. And I remember we always had this back and forth, is that, if a framework is developed and nobody reads it, is it really a framework? Or if nobody uses it, is it really a framework? And I just remember those wonderful conversations. And Swathi, if I would really appreciate it if you would expound on those thoughts where you had about how you saw the frameworks being used in the short term and long term in the government, and what we need to keep these actions this industry government engagement alive and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you for having me again on this panel with all friends. I consider you all friends that have been collaborating partners in crime for the last 3.5 years. So yes, Neil, going back to the subcommittee of bias section of ethical AI, where we had some animated discussions, I would say, I think, absolutely. I think right now also we are involved in a subcommittee of coming up with privacy aspects of AI. And the same question that comes to mind is that what problems are we trying to solve and for whom, which is very foundational, whether you're embarking on your AI journey or you're embarking on creating a framework. So as we are all part of ACT-IAC, we look towards solving the problem of providing sort of a guideline to any industry, academia, or mainly government stakeholders, leaders, to help them with a framework and a guideline as to what steps they have to take in order to implement an AI system. And we're all knowledgeable in various aspects of AI or data science projects, but putting that pen to paper as to this is a step-by-step process, depending on where you are in the life cycle. Maybe you have already done a pilot, so maybe you jump into the implementation aspects of the framework, or you're just embarking and thinking about having a pilot or MVP. So you start at the beginning, what is your criteria to start and your selection and all those aspects. So definitely a framework is nothing if it's not useful to anybody. And to that end, a shout out goes to Todd Liew, who's not on this call, but with his effort, we were able to publish this whole blog on Forbes about these frameworks. And the reason being, yes, people in the DMV, people involved with ACT-IAC, et cetera, know about the frameworks, but what about the general public? What about the state leaders and other government officials residing in other states? We wanted to spread the message, hence we published the Forbes article, which was very well received. And in fact, we did get some negative feedback, which is always good because, you're not doing a good job if you don't get enough brickbats about your work. So we wanted to incorporate the feedback, positive and negative, and have some healthy debates and discussions. And to your point, how do we enhance them, right? So we keep getting feedback. Again, somebody spoke about use cases in all the frameworks we created, especially ethical AI. We didn't have time enough to incorporate use cases, and we always emphasize AI is as good as the use case you're implementing. So there was another subcommittee that was formed to take on the building of the use cases. So I think it's that ongoing work. Yes, we are creating these frameworks to be useful to all leaders who want to embark on their journey, but also making sure that we hear some constructive criticism or even our discussions and debates internally and carry on that work to enhance upon the existing frameworks, which we are continuing to do.
So thank you so much, Swathi. And at this point, I'll ask Sandy a follow-on question, similar in the similar vein that I asked you, is about, for frameworks, it's a lot of time it's building consensus, it's building a partnership, it's building a coalition. In government, Sandy, what are some of the best practices or thoughts around, building these coalitions, continuing the work so that there is give and take from government and industry? Is there something after your illustrious career that maybe you could, let us know what worked for you, in being so successful? Thank you.
Oh, well, thanks, Neil. What does matter is understanding how everyone is rewarded. And I will always say that, and I emphasize rewarded. So performance plans are different for different people in different places. You have to understand what their missions are, but it's not just a mission. So that affects how you can approach people and work with them to bring them together. Because if you don't understand what their organization is going to permit them to do and be grateful for them to have done, you won't be able to enable them to join you. So that's a lot of it in regards to the recruiting. There should be a book on this, and I'm sure Mike Rice has written one, but Mike works with us on many of these leadership things. Unfortunately, right now, Neil, except for folks like you who are in those centers of excellence, I don't know of any books on how to bring people who are sometimes being pulled away based on how they are measured in their organizations. And there's very little that, as you know, that we can do to change that, but we can be smart and emotionally intelligent in how we work with and approach people to enable them to have that space where they can come in. And I will give an example. There's one CTO whom we work with, but we have to give them at least a 2-week advance so that they can get it on a public calendar. If not, they can't be involved, but yet they're very willing to. So there's small things like that, and you have to learn them, and there's no easy path. Over.
Thank you so much. And at this point, we had such an interesting question posed in the chat. And, you know, being that Jim and I go back a long way, I'll be more than happy to put him on the spot, right? And, you know, Jim, for the folks that on the panel are not aware, he's very humble. He's proven himself in the venture capital space. That means, you know, it's a very cutthroat business. And now, you know, he's in academia helping the next generation of technologists prosper, right? Giving them those best practices and stuff. And really for Jim, when we talk even from an academic perspective, biases, right? We are a product of our experiences, and, you know, our aperture is defined by our biases. So as you collaborate and contribute to groups, not only from a venture capital perspective, but also an academic perspective, how do you work, you know, or help work through group dynamics so that everybody on the group, whether they are, you know, they have government equities, whether they have industry equity, whether they have finance equities, whether they have academic equities, right? How do you, what are some of the practices that you have seen work, especially in emerging tech, that help the teams grow and collaborate together, you know, so that everybody achieves more together, and that the frameworks are sustainable, that everybody who participates once, they know that their contribution was meaningful. And then not only that, they're more willing to contribute and evangelize in the future.
Absolutely, Anil. And, you know, I'd like to thank ACT-IAC. I think it's a wonderful organization. And for other academics who are out there, I absolutely, you know, implore you to engage, because there's so many just amazing, talented people in the government, right, who are running large businesses, but also sort of thinking about how to improve business processes. So as a business school professor, this body of work that was created is just fabulous, because it's publicly available, so I can bring it into the classroom. I can challenge the MBA students, you know, how do you think about sort of solving these problems with these tools? Now, whether you're sitting in a big agency or you're working for a for-profit, you know, Fortune 500 company, I think it's very similar, right? And what do I mean by that? Like, people are very important. So this group who Sandy and Nevin lead, and Fred and Swathi and Todd, you know, there's a tremendous amount of them, Dawn. It's just a great organization. It's just a great group of people to come in here and share ideas. Now, we don't have to always agree, and sometimes we disagree, but we're still friends at the end of the day, which I think is very important. So it's good to sort of, you know, talk about these different ways to think about AI. What is the best way to sort of put this into production? Even like blockchains, and I think it's an emerging technology that a lot of people, even in the government and the industry, even in academics, we're scratching our heads to try to figure out how do we use this. But the opportunities there. And I think, you know, collaborating, writing things down helps us think clearly about these issues, and, you know, trying to put together a common vision of where we should go. I think that's very important. Now, if Nevin and Sandy were like some of the professors at Johns Hopkins were a little bit harsh, I don't think we would be where we are, but they're always very encouraging. So I've learned a lot from both of them in terms of being encouraging in the classroom. So even now when I teach, right, I whenever someone asks me a question, I always try to make them feel, that it's not a stupid question, right? And you got to find students where they're at. You got to find executives where they're at in terms of their knowledge when it comes to AI and machine learning and big data. You meet them there, you build a relationship, and then you bounce ideas off of each other. And I think that continues, but the underlying, base platform is kind of being friends, right? And you're trying to solve a common problem. I think that's what, we have to sort of go back on. And diversity is amazing. I think Joyce is not here, but bringing in different sort of flavors of, the historical views of agencies, what was it like before, what is it like now, and just understanding the dynamics of, the different sort of political systems that come across, and, which way are people focused in at, is just fabulous. I'm very encouraged, and, I'm very thankful that I got to participate in the ACT-IAC, these working groups. It's just amazing. I encourage, people to engage. With that, I'll turn it back over to you. I'll just quickly say with regards to venture capital, I think, a startup is a very difficult thing to do, but you can learn a lot from how government thinks about creating small projects and launching small projects and how to do that successfully. I think very similar skills are there when you do sort of a venture capital startup, for profit. Over.
So, Jim, thank you for teeing up my next question, right? And this will go to both Swathi and Fred. Is this idea, we're all, as the panelists, you're very seasoned at what you do, you're very accomplished. When you have a young engineer or somebody young in your organization, maybe a couple of years out of college, not, maybe 2 or 3 or whatnot, and they're still learning about the art of selling, right? They're still learning about the art of like closing the sale. They're still learning about, hey, how do I sell my product so I still have a job? And then these opportunities come up like ACT-IAC or other industry engagement forums. What sort of advice would you give these folks where, it's about, one, you're telling them it's okay to participate in these type of engagements, industry engagement, right? And the other thing is about, it's not about the sale. You can't talk about your proprietary product. And, how do you have those mentoring discussions with the next generation that comes up to you and say, I would like to do this, but how do I do this? What should I do? What should I not do when I'm starting off in these groups so that I get invited back? So either Swathi or Fred, you want to take the jump and then followed by the next.
Absolutely. I can go ahead since I mentor middle school girls, high school girls, mid-career women, and everyone in between. And I've led engineering teams. And so the whole feedback and a learning moment for them is that there is no right or wrong question or statement. The whole point is in participation and speaking up. As an immigrant to this country, I learned the hard way that it's okay to speak up. It's okay to be assertive. And it took me many years to learn that, because where I come from, the culture was different. We wait for our turn. And over here, it's not, you just speak up. So I always encourage everyone, if you have something to say, just say it and have no second thoughts about it. Also let go of, your apprehensiveness as what will people be judging me or what have you. And people have no time, frankly, for that, right? You're just like a blip in their life. So just say what you want to say and move on. But having said that, I think you have to do your homework. I emphasize that a lot. And you spoke about the AI working groups at 11 a.m. and Dawn actually posted in the chat, how does it help an individual grow? I think for me personally, it helps me grow tremendously because there are meetings I come prepared. Of course, there are many meetings I don't prepare, but there are meetings, especially when we're working on ethical AI and we had to discuss and debate certain points. I had to come prepared, do my research and do your homework. So it's important to voice your thoughts, but also it helps even if you put in 5 to 10 minutes of effort to come prepared to those meetings. And like Jim mentioned, we encourage everybody to speak up. And I think the power of a consensus-based organization is in every diverse voice that is being opened up and heard, as well as diverse voices that represent somebody else. So for example, we are in the AI privacy discussion subcommittee, and there was a representative who was representing a protected class who do not have the access to these working groups. There are parts of communities who don't even know what AI is. And if there is a representative from that community whose voice has to be heard, I think we are very encouraging. We are a very democratized organization. And it's true for most places. I don't think I've been, even if I was the only woman on the table, I've never been discouraged about what I had to say. I just have to make sure that you voice your thoughts, sometimes put in a little bit of that homework.
So Fred, same thing, right? It's the question about when you are in a working group with some of your, for lack of a better word, competitors, right, from industry, how do you collaborate with them so that when government is also at the table and academia is also at the table, it's about distilling a problem set that needs to be solved vice a sale that needs to be made? How do you bring in, especially if there are some junior engineers or whatnot at the table that have great ideas, how do you coach, mentor, help develop them on how they need to collaborate so that everybody's solving a problem versus closing a sale? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, so first, when you have young engineers or young folks that come to our meeting, just the fact that they are there is already a good step, because they took the initiative. Because as you said, it's not necessarily something that is directly, put into the career path or to the path that they would take. For my own experience, it's when you start your career and you need to learn a lot of things, but you're also very mission oriented, right? I mean, you have a scope, you have a certain things to do, and it's what you have into your performance plan and whatever. But sometimes it's very easy to maybe have tunnel vision and not necessarily try to see how or why even is what you're doing impactful, or why is it done. Having the meeting that we have, or having discussions in groups like ACT-IAC and others is a good way to see why it has an impact on people on the receiving end, for instance, or even on other side of the government that I may not have thought of, right? So that's very important, and that's, I think, what we try to stress. I think having rules like, yes, making a safe place, a safe environment for force from the government, but also force from big businesses, small businesses, to come and to work on some challenges together to create some sort of content that is going to be useful. Not necessarily having an ROI in terms of how much money that's going to make me or that's going to save me based on where you are, but also just what type of impact is that gonna have on the citizen services, or how much we can learn, right? I think it's it's why I do it as well. We are here, we are content oriented, I would say. And the goal is to make sure that it's useful for members of the government. But it turns out that by doing that, then it becomes useful to us as well. I mean, some examples related to like, I mean, cybersecurity or FISMA or all that. Turns out that now maybe, I mean, a lot of private companies are gonna have to, I mean, are gonna start using what we are learning and what we are automating through the government, because it's like, well, now that it's automated, maybe we can use it. So it turns out to be a good thing. So yeah.
So, this brings me back to Jim, because, you're at that space and you have talked about this concept of having a space, a safe space for your students to explore and grow. And, frameworks are always a good way, at least in my mind, of framing a larger problem, putting some structure around it that makes it understandable and solvable. So when you have frameworks that are developed, collaboratively between government and industry, how do you take those frameworks, introduce those frameworks to your class? And then when you have your students that have a great iterative idea on that framework, how do you get that idea back, that iteration back to government and academia and industry, as part of these working groups? Is there a way where you just say, like Swathi said, don't be afraid to speak up? You just encourage your students to say, why don't you just come with me to one of these meetings and speak up, because this is your idea, it's not mine. So, Jim, if you could just talk about that college experience, when they are in that academic space, how do you take a framework, sell it, or, explain it to them, and then help them iterate it, and then bring those great ideas back, those unvarnished ideas back to the groups?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to share a little personal story, right? I'm Korean American, right? I feel like I'm an American, and I have two daughters, right? They're Asian American. And my first daughter, she doesn't really speak up. And I'm like, did I do something culturally? Why doesn't she like talk? I want you to, and then she speaks very quietly. I'm like, no, speak out loud. But, she's only a sophomore. So I'm like, okay, maybe there's a time when, after college, she'll get to the point, right? But, my point is that, even when I look at my life, right, my parents immigrated over here. I think for the first part of my life, I was just sitting there watching like a wallflower, just not understanding what's going on. And then at some point, sort of it kicks in, but you have to be given that opportunity. So I did what Sandy did to me, to my TA, which was Sam. Sandy said, just come on here and go do this. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. He's like, just do it. So I did exactly the same thing to my TA. I said, Sam, come over here.